Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers, and we are on this show talk about everything that's horror in terms of cult films and classic horror films. Today, I have a special guest with me. Well, not so special, as though he's been here multiple times, so he's really almost a co-host, just only in name only. I want to welcome everyone to our guest for this evening, Thomas Tinnerello. And we're going to be discussing one of my favorite films, which is Lucille Fulci's The Beyond or Seven Doors of Death. But first, let's get Thomas to tell everyone a little bit about what he does and why he's so important to our podcast.
Oh, Kevin, I didn't know I was that important to you, man. I'm touched. I am a writer, director, novelist. I'm actually writing my second novel that I've ever written in my life. It's a Christmas book, and it's also horror. Hopefully, you'll be able to, buy it on Amazon by next Christmas. Also a podcaster. This is my only one. Hopefully, I'll have another one coming next year. So yeah, that's pretty much that. And I try to do this show as much as possible because it's loads of fun.
Thank you. And I'm sure all of our guests here love to hear not only your opinions on some of the movies we discussed, but all the other amazing guests that we've had on the show, because there is nothing more than I like to talk about than it is cult and classic movies, of which The Beyond is one of them. This is one of those films that a lot of people either love or they hate. But first, tell me a little bit about some of your first impressions the first time you saw this movie.
Well, the first time I saw this, I know we were, we talked about the zombie beforehand. I like to consider this part of the Fulci zombie trilogy, because I watched this one after the other. I watched Zombie, City of the Living Dead, and The Beyond, like back to back, probably on Tubi or Shudder, during COVID. And we had sold our house, our big 2-story house, and now we were living in my sister-in-law's house. And I couldn't sleep. We wouldn't have any room in the bed. They didn't have enough bedrooms for us, so I had to sleep on the couch. So I saw The Beyond, on my little phone, huddled with my blanket over my head, with it close to the screen, my face like this, and that's how I saw it. And like as soon as the credits were done in the beginning, I was like, "What in the crap is this?"
Go ahead.
And then after that, maybe we'll get into this a little later. After that, it became sort of the main influence on me for writing the script that I'm like most proud of right now, my own zombie script, that kind of takes a lot of the themes and ideas of this movie and just goes way further with it. So this movie is definitely like writ itself way into the DNA of some stuff that I'm hoping to accomplish as well.
Okay. So my first time seeing this, and my impressions a little bit much older, obviously, because I did not know it was a Lucille Fulci movie when I first saw it. In fact, when I first saw it, probably in the early 90s, somewhere around there, I had seen a really crappy copy of it labeled Seven Doors of Death. Now, when I saw it, I thought it was, whoa, this is the weirdest fucking movie I've ever seen. It was weird. I didn't know who Lucille Fulci was. I didn't know this was really an Italian film. I just thought it was very weird when I first saw it. But I also thought it was because it was a crappy version I had of the movie. So if you got one of those really crappy, like 4th generation VHS dubbed versions of the movie, that's what I was watching when I first saw this movie. So it wasn't one of those films that really took me at all. The only thing I really liked about the movie is the ending. I liked the way the movie ended. It was like, whoa, that's some crazy shit.
Oh, we'll get into that. There's a lot.
Exactly. We'll get into that. When I saw it again, when I was older and I knew who the hell Lucille Fulci was, And I realized, well, let me first say, I didn't realize what the movie was, the alternate title of The Beyond was. I started to go through all of his movies and started to see his movies that I hadn't seen before. This was way before the internet, so it wasn't as easy to look up like it is now. I saw the movie The Beyond and realized it was really, really familiar, but I couldn't figure out why. I was like, man, this movie was familiar. I don't know why. Until I got to the end and realized, holy shit, I've seen this movie before. Because I remembered the ending. I didn't remember much of anything else until after I'd seen it and said, holy shit, this movie's so much better than a really good DVD version of it instead of my crappy fourth generation VHS dub. And so therefore it changed my opinions of the movie. And of course by then I knew who Lucio Fulci was. And then I started seeing his other movies, House by the Cemetery and Zombie and all of his other movies. Zombie being the first movie his I really, really gravitated to. I had seen some of his other movies, but didn't know who the hell he was at the time. So but that's the impression I had of this movie. Was the ending stuck with me for years.
Oh yeah, so it's stuck with me too. But I think the beginning of this movie is also a masterclass at how you freaking start a movie, and which every time I see a boss beginning of something, I always imagine this like Russian film reviewer, who's like, "That is how you start the freaking movie." Only he doesn't say freaking. So. But you mentioned it earlier that this movie is part of a trilogy, but not like in the traditional sense of a trilogy we think of.
No,
like definitely not like George Romero's zombie flicks, which could conceivably be in the same reality.
Yeah, these are the Gates of Hell.
The Gates of trilogy, which there's 3 movies. Technically, City of the Living Dead is the first one, and it was also called Gates of Hell. Yep. Although, if you think about it, that's probably a better title for it. Because the whole plot revolves around a evil priest who commits suicide and tries to open the gates of hell for reasons, and like you do, I guess, when you're an evil priest. But and that movie was set in Louisiana.
Yeah,
and I think some of it was shot in Savannah, actually, because let's face it, you do not have basements in Louisiana and stuff like that. Oh no, wait, this movie was shot in Louisiana. I think City of the Living Dead was shot in Savannah, and then the third one I don't know where it was. Anyway, so like there's City of the Living Dead, which actually I would argue is more bonkers than this movie. Like City of the Living Dead, I mean, I would say like The Beyond is his most nightmarish movie, and I would say Fulci's most scariest movie, and I'll explain why. But City of the Living Dead, I think, is his most nightmarish because, I mean, City of the Living Dead features teleporting zombies.
Yeah.
Freaking teleporting telekinetic zombies. I mean, at least in this movie, for all its weirdness, the zombies freaking actually do things, for the most part, that are in line with what you think of as a normal zombie does, with one very big exception that we'll get into. And then the third one, of course, House by the Cemetery, pretty much everybody says is the least good of the 3. I still have not seen it because I've heard nothing but middling reviews for it.
Oh, you should see it just so you've seen all 3 of them. And it's actually interesting to see all 3 of them in the order, just for the sake. Well, I recently saw all 3 of them in the order only because if you are a fan of Eben Press, they kind of took all 3 of these movies and made them into a coherent story.
I can see I can do that. There is a way I think you could. Yeah. Because and we'll probably get into that later, but like but I feel like, maybe we'll talk about this later if we ever do House by the Cemetery, but like I can see why he did House by the Cemetery, because I feel like House by the Cemetery is kind of the movie that he wanted to make with The Beyond, because we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with spoilers, but this movie did have some studio interference to it, and they kind of forced Fulci to put more zombies in this movie than there originally was.
Yeah.
But I think House by the Cemetery was basically like he wanted to do the Beyond, but with a family and like make the horror more personal.
Yep.
Which I admit that's a good goal to have. Um, but at the same time, I think he kind of screws the audience over because it's House by the Cemetery is a zombie movie with one friggin' zombie. I'm sorry, but that does not count. I think to me, Kevin, I feel like to be qualified as a zombie movie, you need at least I'm gonna say 4. You need at least 4 freaking zombies in your zombie movie in order to qualify.
We'll have a conversation on some of the other zombie films that usually only have one, maybe two in them. Then
I don't know. I think you got to have at least 3 or 4 because you got to put them on and preferably in one scene.
all right, so I won't mention like Dead Girl or Zombie Honeymoon or any of those. They only really have one.
I have not seen Zombie Honeymoon or Dead Girl. Dead Girl looks disgusting to me in like morally repugnant ways. But anyway, so I was gonna say what these 3 movies are very different, but they have these 4 things in common.
Yes.
Okay, number one, they have zombies in them. Some of them don't have enough of them. But number 2, they all star Katarina McCall.
That's my girl.
Yeah, we'll talk about her later. She's like, I guess she's like Fulci's Hitchcock blonde, basically. Oh. And they all have a forbidden book. Like in City of the Living Dead, it's the Book of Enoch, which actually does exist, and I've read it. This movie, it is in this movie, it is the Book of Abion, which we'll get into. That book does not exist. So there's a forbidden book that's the MacGuffin, and then finally there is the gates of hell being opened by an evil dude. And I guess you could say that's the 5th thing is there's an evil dude.
Yeah.
In the first movie, it's evil priest. This movie, it's evil warlock. Although I would say, is he really evil? Question mark. And then the third one, it's evil mad scientist named Dr. Freudstein.
Dr. Freudstein.
I guess that's Fulci making fun of psychology. I don't know. Like
you need to see the movie to actually, yeah, like it makes it funny because Dr. Freudstein's in the house the entire movie. So
these movies got 4 things in common. They got zombies.
Yep.
They got Katarina McCall, the Hitchcock blonde of Fulci.
Yep.
Forbidden. There's a forbidden book that's like the MacGuffin. And then there's also the gates of hell are being opened by some evil dude. In this movie is a warlock / painter named Shrike. Although, as we'll get into it, I'm wondering if he really is evil after all. So we were talking about earlier how this movie is known for its ending, but honestly, I think the beginning is also amazeballs. So, like I said before, I think this is Fulci's most nightmarish movie. Although I haven't seen all of his horror movies, so I can't really say that with any authority.
It is one of his most. This is the one that seems to go the most unusual and plays on this dream logic. Most of his other films are pretty straightforward. This is one that plays on a lot of dream logic.
Yeah.
Why this one stays with me longer than a lot of his other movies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also has like a different tone. Like I feel like Zombie is just fun. I mean, there's some upsetting scenes and jump scares in it, but by and large, that movie is just fun. This movie is still fun, but there's also some stuff that just gets under my skin a little.
Yeah. So let me tell you this before you go on. The thing about this, I kind of reference this as Lucio Fulci's Suspiria. With Dario Argento, Suspiria was so different from his other Giallo films that a lot of people took notice. It was very dreamlike, fairy tale like, very different from what he had done before. This is, to me, Fulci's film like that. That's why this is why it stuck with me for so many years. It's that type of logic, that type of feeling I get from watching this movie.
Yeah, and it is dream logic instead of just random crap that happens. Because I do think that for the most part there is something holding it together. It does have a structure.
Yeah.
Although I think it's in researching this movie in particular, I think is when I found out how he writes stuff. I mean, that's probably also a good time for us to mention that this movie has like 4 credited writers. Fulci is one of them. But apparently when Fulci writes stuff, he doesn't outline. He just writes a bunch of scenes and sequences that he'd like to see in this story, and then puts them together in a way that he finds most interesting. Sometimes they don't really make sense. Sometimes they do. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. So I kind of did something like that, and that's pretty much how I do pre-writing now for anything.
Well, I know we mentioned before that you hadn't seen Cat in the Brain, and Cat in the Brain is very much like this in that dream logic.
Well, this movie was also written by, like Zombie, was also co-written by Dardano Sechinandi, and his wife probably had a little bit of say in it too, because she also co-wrote Zombie. Then we have Giorgia Maurizio, who also wrote such fantastic films as Apache Woman, Contraband, and the third part of the Gates of Hell trilogy, House by the Cemetery. And IMDb rightly credits H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith as inspiration, quote unquote. This is, I think, his most Lovecraftian movie ever.
Huh.
And we will get into what, because it kind of is cosmic horror in the Lovecraftian sense. And we'll get into what I mean by that, and also what Fulci straight up ripped off from both Ashton Smith and Lovecraft. But like I said, this movie's got a boss opening. It's sepia tone.
Yeah.
Louisiana, 1901. Thunderstorm. By the way, thunderstorms always get me in the mood for horror. Anytime I know it's cliche, but man, I love it when it's like, that's it. I'm in. Good thunderstorm, and I'm in.
Oh my God. But you're right. This, like I was saying, when I first saw the movie, I thought it was like this weird 4th generation VHS copy. And when I see the sepia tone opening,
you thought that's how the movie is?
I thought that was how the whole movie was. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Oh, man. If the whole movie was like that, that would have been really disappointing.
But the thing was, I used to get these bootleg movies all the time from friends of mine on VHS, 4th generation fucking VHS bootlegs. So I'm used to that anyways. And this happened to be one of those movies like that. That's the reason why it was a 4th generation. I could tell it was freaking recorded by someone else who gave another recording to someone else, and so on and so forth until it made it in my arms. But like I said, it was called Seven Doors Bleh.
I can't imagine how much the VHS version of this just kind of just like crummies up Fabio Fabrizi's amazing music, because like that was one of the things that I hated about the VHS days, was like every now and then the tape would go, and the audio would just sound like crap.
I will, trust me now. I have I have a Blu-ray version of The Beyond. It's a much better copy. I know what it sounds like. I know what it's supposed to look like. This is probably, next to Zombie, the film of Fulci's I've watched the most. Surprisingly, I've also watched The Black Cat a lot as well, and House by Cemetery. I kind of like the imagery in House by Cemetery. Yes, it is not his best film. Neither is Cat in the Brain, but there's this sense of humor in it that I just absolutely love. That being said,
I'll have to check out his Black Cat, because I like that story. It seems like everybody's done a version of The Black Cat by Poe.
Everybody has done a version of the Black. I probably have 6 or 7 copies of The Black Cat by different directors in my collection right now.
Yeah, and Stuart Gordon did the best version for Masters of Horror, I think.
Oh, shit. But, this movie when it came out was, I mean, it was gory. It was, I remember the tarantula sequence when the library.
Oh,
It
that
just
I have opinions about that sequence.
you have opinions. I want to hear your opinions.
But we'll get into that shortly. Anyway, like the beginning of this movie, though, you got an angry mob coming with torches, very universal horror, and you see like Shrike painting a painting, and we don't know, but like the painting is basically the end of the movie.
Yeah,
and it's just like really great painting. I wish I had it. And but then we cut to Emily, which we'll get into, and she's reading from our evil book.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I love about this sequence is the cross cutting between her, the mob, Shrike, the rhythm of it is great.
Yeah.
And then really interesting little bit where they get into his hotel because this black man lets them in. I assume it's his slave because of the time period, yep. And also get into this also, and also because what many people think is the real life inspiration for this movie. But like the black man who I think is the slave, he lets these guys in, and he's just like there's a feeling of like he is relieved and happy, but also sweaty and scared.
Yeah.
Thank God you're here, but oh my God, help you. But then they get Shrike, they nail him to the freaking wall, literally.
Yep.
And then put quicklime on for reasons, which is basically like instant mummification, but also looks like they're pouring acid on him.
Yeah.
And that maybe is part of the reason why some other people later on get some acid on them.
You know what? Didn't think about that.
Yeah, see? But also it's like this what was it? This mummification is like but what's interesting to me though is like just before he's doing this is why I think Shrike isn't necessarily evil. He's saying, Don't do this. I'm the only one who can save you.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe Shrike wasn't a warlock, but he was doing something supernatural, some sort of spell with the Book of Abion that would have closed the gates of hell. But because these ignorant white folk come in and tear some stuff up and don't like anything that's different from them, they came in and basically created, in a sense, what I think Shrike is maybe not a devil persona, but maybe like this dark Christ figure.
Huh.
Like a Christ figure who, instead of rising from the dead to redeem the world, rises from the dead to basically get revenge on the world for dooming itself.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, and I think that goes into and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I think that's what the true horror of this story is structurally speaking. I've never really seen anything like this except for Hereditary, which is to say a film in which the main characters are completely and totally helpless and victims of cosmic fate. And like the fate of the world and them is literally decided in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Huh.
Just think about it. Once Shrike is dead, that's it. Everything has been set in motion. Nothing they do changes that. Everything that happens after that is just the aftermath of that one thing. And that's the real horror of this story, is that you, in this day and age, are the victim of some crap that happened 100 years ago that you had nothing to do with. People who have been dead for years sealed your fate with one mistake, and now you're going to pay for it because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That is very interesting. I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right with what Shrike says. And it just never dawned on me till now. But if you put together that ideology with that of like say something from H.P. Lovecraft, and I can see now where that kind of mixes in. Because when you said that, I was like, what? I never even picked up on any type of H.P. Lovecraft thing in here. But if you're thinking that the warlock is actually trying to stop something and ignorant people stop him from doing it, everything that happens afterwards is the aftermath. A perfect word for it. The aftermath of what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
now I have to go watch it again. Damn it!
I mean, we're taught as screenwriters to give our characters agency, but this is a story where your characters cannot possibly have agency, and if they do, it's merely the illusion of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you get in the end of the movie. It is the illusion of a struggle to survive, but there's no way they're getting out of this. And like I said, the only other mainstream film I can think of that does anything like that is Hereditary.
Yeah.
But you don't know that. You don't know that Toni Collette's fate is sealed years before this movie happens. You don't know that they have no control over their eventual horrible deaths until like the end of the movie. This movie tells you that right off the get-go.
Yeah. Huh.
Which is part of the genius of it. But also I love the fact that when when Emily is reading this thing and reads, and through this the world, and it says, through one of these 7 gates, evil will invade the world. Fire! And then when the fire comes on, color comes in.
Yeah.
And rolling credits, and I'm the rolling credits, and I'm Fabio Fabrizi's score, and I'm like, that is how you start a freaking movie.
Oh, well, now that you put it in that context, it is definitely a great way to start the movie. Now, and that's the thing about this movie is like I've seen it a lot of times now, and I never thought of it like that. And now I have to rewatch it again just to think of it in that context, because it was like, because that wasn't even an ideal that was expressed in the comic book adaptation, which I really enjoyed. But now I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it again. Because now what you just said kind of opens my eyes to other possibilities to the way the story unfolds.
Oh, well, but the Lovecraftian stuff doesn't stop there. So the Book of Abion that she was reading that set her eyes on fire, literally, is basically an invention of this guy named Clark Ashton Smith, who was a cosmic horror writer in, I think, the 20s. And he was one of the founders of Weird Tales magazine. Which is another part of my origin story with this movie, because when I was a kid and I first started buying books and magazines and stuff to actually, adult fiction and stuff to read myself, I think maybe when I was like freshman in high school, maybe in middle school, one of the things that I ordered through a catalog you had to send for in the mail, remember those, was this big old anthology collection of short stories for Weird Tales magazine. And that Clark Ashton Smith was one of the editors of that thing. I think he died back in the 60s or something. But anyway, he was a big contributor to Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. And the Book of Abion is supposed to be this book that was transcribed by this necromancer from this demon lord named Sugahagahuga. I can't pronounce that. In, quote, some distant prehistoric epoch, unquote. It's first mentioned in Smith's story Uba Safala in 1933, so it's public domain. You could adapt this story. The book also appears in one of Lovecraft's own stories because he and Ashton Smith were bros. And it's the 2 stories actually. Dreams of the Witch House, the book appears in.
Oh, okay.
And in the story Shadow Out of Time, Book of Abion appears in that story too.
Huh. I've never read any of Lovecraft's physical stories before. I have read adaptations of his work.
I've read one. I think I read one of his stories because in that Weird Tales magazine, it does have one of Lovecraft's stories, but not one of his famous stories. It has like a really obscure one, I think, called He, and it has something to do with some guy walking in upstate New York. He sees this weird black tentacled zombie and then sees like a vision of New York in the future, which may or may not be Manhattan. It's really weird the way he wrote it. Yeah. weird the way he wrote it. You could interpret it that way, but anyway, yeah. So it can be considered cosmic horror in the Lovecraftian sense because it's evil. The villain of this story is not really Shrike coming back from the dead, although you see him. It's really like this unknowable evil that's beyond anything you can see.
Yeah.
In fact, this really plays into kind of Fulci's theme of eyeballs and eyes and seeing and how horrible it is to see the thing that is horrible. Like Zombie, you think you saw some eye trauma in Zombie? You're gonna see some eye trauma in this movie too. But there's a great video on YouTube by this content creator called In Praise of Shadows.
Okay.
He did a whole video on the cosmic horror of the beyond. And he pointed out that most Lovecraftian horrors usually end when somebody sees or beholds the beyond, other dimension that's beyond your comprehension, or an unspeakable monster with tentacles and eyeballs. And just looking at this thing with your eyes makes you freaking go insane.
Yeah.
Because your brain can't comprehend it. Well, in this movie, Fulci and the other writers take that trope, and instead of saying that you go insane, you go blind.
You go blind. Interesting.
Or if you don't go blind, you get your eyeballs gouged out.
Oh, that too. You do
because it's like the evil doesn't want anyone to know that it exists.
Yeah.
It hides in plain sight, and if you do see it, guess what? It's your ass. Or in this case, it's your eyes. They will just gouge it out. Or in the case of poor Emily, it's a hear no evil, speak no evil.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I rewatch all of these again, I'll have to see if there's other Lovecraftian references in the other two movies, because then that will allow me to see all three in a different light. The way we're talking now, it seems to me that Fulci had H.P. Lovecraft really embedded in the story with certain elements, if they are not directly associated with one or more of the stories. Like, the Reanimator, obviously, with Stuart Gordon's The Reanimator, very much is linked to H.P. Lovecraft. In the Mouth of Madness is very much linked to H.P. Lovecraft. This one seems to be very subtle. And for the hardcore fans may have noticed it. I didn't notice it. But I've also never read H.P. Lovecraft directly. So if I had,
I think a lot of people who consider themselves Lovecraft stans, if I may use the modern internet term for that, haven't actually read his stuff, to be honest, either. Honestly, Stephen King has a great criticism of Lovecraft, and he loves Lovecraft and references and apes kind of the interconnected cosmic horror stuff in Stephen King's own stuff, in his own stuff. But he's the first one to tell you, yeah, Lovecraft was good at some things, but dialogue and characterization was not one of those things. Like, he could not, probably because Lovecraft was such an introvert, and I guess hated women and hated like most people and foreigners and people who weren't white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I never really read much of his, because he was a bigot / racist, and he was against women, and I just didn't know if I wanted to spend my time reading his ideals on what a good story is.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's why I also kind of gravitate towards the guys Lovecraft, built from and stood the giants that he stood on their shoulders of, like Poe, obviously.
Yeah.
Lovecraft himself would be the first one to tell you this. It's not like a secret, or that we're criticizing him for saying that he ripped off these guys. No, he straight up says, these are the guys I took from. It's Edgar Allan Poe is the big one, but also Arthur Machen, who wrote The Great God Pan.
Yeah.
He's basically like the Christian mystic version of Lovecraft. And then you have Algernon Blackwood and Arthur Mack. I'm sorry, we already said Arthur Mack, but M.R. James is who I was thinking of.
M.R. James.
M.R. James, the master of the British Christmas ghost story. Uh,
That's
those
exactly.
those are the guys who I prefer. If you're to say that, like, Lovecraft is rock and roll, and then these guys were the blues and the thing that created it. So yeah. But other than that, but going back to the movie, I feel like but structurally speaking, it is Lovecraftian horror. It is a zombie movie, but it's also just a straight up haunted house movie. Like for the
Yes.
whole
Yes.
section, it's just a haunted house movie, except in this case, the house is a hotel.
Yeah.
A hotel that, for reasons, Katarina McCall just inherits.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do get to know a little bit about her later on, where she's like, I think her dad or something loaned it to her, and she feels like she did some modeling. She did this and that in New York. And then I came down here and thought, well, this is my last chance. I can, make money off this hotel. And then we start just her like renovating this place.
Yeah.
And some poor workman named Larry, who by the way is played by the Louisiana Film Commission chairman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was his cameo. Like, I guess in exchange for letting you shoot here, put me in the movie, y'all. And I'm like, okay, sure.
And kill you. Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think he dies, actually. I don't think Larry dies. I think he just falls after getting freaking startled by seeing Emily.
That's right. He just falls. He just falls.
He falls. It looks like he's dead because he got so much freaking blood coming out of his mouth. Because every wound in a Fulci movie is excessive.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun of a Fulci movie. There's lots of gore in these movies, whether or not it's what do you call it? Whether or not it's needed or relevant is a different story. Like I was telling you about the spider sequence earlier.
Well, I mean, you say this about Fulci. He doesn't go half measures on anything.
No.
It's because, and like, so yeah, we said the reason why, but like, he only gets hurt really to jump scare us, and also for an excuse to enter player 2, Dr. John McCabe, played by dude whose name I can't remember. I'm just gonna call him John McCabe from now on. But he was a fairly famous British actor, I think. So anyway, he examines poor Larry, quickly leaves. We don't see him again for a good long while. But in comes Joe the plumber. There's literally a character in this movie named Joe the plumber. And he looks like a guy named Joe the plumber. And he has an interesting truck with an interesting license plate. I wonder if this is Fulci taking a swipe at Christianity. I don't know. But anyway, Joe the plumber goes down to the basement, which is flooded a lot.
A lot, and it's the largest basement known to mankind.
Yeah, like a catacomb almost. And again, this is supposed to be Louisiana. There ain't no basements in Louisiana. Although, truth be told, if you did try to put a basement in Louisiana, yeah, it probably would be that flooded because that's literally sea level. In fact, the whole city is below sea level.
Oh my god! But
Joe comes in like, oh, we just put a sump pump in here. We'll get this out real quick.
It does make for a really cool visual, though. I do have to say that.
Oh yes, it does.
The flooded basement.
Oh yeah. But I have to say, like when Joe goes in there, and he goes to the area, like that first little scare with him and how he dies. That is the first time that I just like was terrified. Like that's when because that made me jump. When that hand out of the wall, it grabs it like holy frack. Part of that is the build up to it, and also the sound effects. The sound of the evil or the weird sounds that are just coming out of that hole. Which, having seen it now 3 times, I know now that based on the geography of that room, that hole is literally the gateway to hell.
Oh my god!
And that's where we get our first eye trauma. He pokes out Joe's eyeball.
Well, as we've discussed with Zombie, Fulci does not shy away from the eye trauma. And the thing is, even though
Yeah.
he continued to do it for multiple films, it still is unnerving to us as to us audience members, because eye trauma is very unnerving. It puts you on the edge.
Yeah. Because it's such a sensitive part of your body.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't even like having hold on, there's my roommate talking in the next room. I don't know if you can hear that, but I can hear it.
I can't.
Okay,
He's talking to you through the walls. So maybe if you get too close to the wall, a hand might come out and grab you.
Crack. Oh no, don't you dare. That'll be in my nightmares tonight then. Screw you, Kevin Powers. Screw you.
Well, the thing is this. Well, you gotta remember my fourth generation version of this. I probably couldn't hear any of the actual real sound effects. They probably were all gone. That's good.
Well, you should probably listen to this movie with headphones so you can get like the surround.
Oh, I have now, because I told you I have the Blu-ray version now. But when I originally saw it, it did not affect me that way, which is why I told you I forgot most of it, except for the ending. That's the thing, when you're young and you see these things in the late 80s, early 90s, like I did, it's one of a billion horror films that comes out. Or one of, I didn't see this when they originally came out, so I saw this movie years and years later on a VHS dub. So when I saw it, it wasn't new. I didn't know who Lucio Fulci was. I didn't have that background of any of this. I think at some time before I hit fucking senior / sophomore in high school is when I really got to know who Lucio Fulci was. But I saw this before then. So I saw it. It has some amazing kills. And I remembered the ending for it. The ending was cool. I'd never seen anything like that. I was like, holy shit, that's some cool shit. When you get older and you learn, you go through and you see Fulci's movies, you've seen a huge chunk of them like I have. You go back and you rewatch The Beyond and you see his technical prowess in that movie. It was much different than his later films. Like, there's a reason why this one is so appreciated and remembered by his fans, whereas something like Cat in the Brain or even The Black Cat isn't as fondly remembered. The Black Cat, it's an adequately made film, but it doesn't have that special Fulci, that pizzazz, that little thing that makes it special.
He cared with this one. He cared to try and do that thing that he started doing. I think he does. He probably does this a lot more with City of Living Dead, where City of Living Dead is like a frontal assault on you, the audience's fear of death and rotting. Like the whole thing is about City of Living Dead, especially is about, like, visually speaking. Not even talking about the plot. Is visually speaking about you confronting the idea of the betrayal of your flesh in the corruption of rotting and death. This movie, he also kind of keeps that going a little bit with several things, like with the spider sequence, but because like the idea of getting eaten alive by is part of the eventual, fate of our physical bodies, is we're going to get eaten alive or we're going to get eaten dead by worms and bugs and things like that. Or in the case of the beginning of this movie, getting just covered and dissolved in acid. Of course, we'll get into what happens with acid, because like there's so many. Like I said, this movie is very strung. It feels like it structurally feels like nightmare sequences that are strung together by the plot. Yeah. Because as Katarina McCall comes in and buys this hotel, tries to renovate it.
Yep.
She is immediately confronted with some strange things, but is completely unaware of the fact until like midway through that everyone around her is dying and is getting killed in horrible, disgusting ways.
Yeah.
Starting from, I think, the three weird people who run the hotel, and then Joe the plumber. But like everybody who dies becomes back as a zombie in Shrike's the Warlock Shrike's service, basically, and kill somebody else, with the exception of the spider guy. And that's kind of how it progresses. And in the meantime, she starts teaming up with Dr. John McCabe to try and figure out what the heck is going on, when all the time they're completely helpless to fate, because the daggum evil doesn't work by dream logic. I mean, doesn't work by any logic, just dream logic. And also doesn't play fair either. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk now about. Well, first let's briefly talk about Emily, the mysterious kind of beautiful. Which, by the way, I don't have the actress's name immediately right now, but I saw an interview with her that she did about Fulci that was recorded, I think, in 2017. Oh my gosh, she looks exactly the same. She has not aged a day, and she looks amazing. But anyway, so she's a very Italian woman. That is not her voice. She does not speak English, and you can tell because her lips do not match because everyone's dubbed.
But the greatness of early Italian cinema, where they didn't record sound with video.
Yep. Everything was post-synced. They didn't have to worry about that. But like this Emma's blind girl and her dog Dickie. I love the fact the dog's name is Dickie. He is not a good boy. Oh no, he is not a good boy. She comes in, but we first see her though on this bridge, which is like this famous causeway in New Orleans. I don't know the name of it, but my gosh, it looks like a freaking progressive rock art thing. She's just walking in the middle of this friggin' bridge, and Katerina McCall just drives up to her, and she's like, "You must be Suzanne," or I think that's Katerina McCall's character name. And she's like, "I'm Emily." And then she takes her to her house, which looks weird and has a piano, and she's playing the piano, playing the really creepy piano music by our composer. And she basically says, sell the hotel, get out of there. I can't tell you why. Just trust me. Bam. She's out of there. And that's her whole function, is to basically be a gate guardian. Yeah. The harbinger of doom. The person you should have listened to at the beginning of the movie. But I will say, like, Emily's eyes, those white contacts, that there's the look of them, I think, is so iconic, and so much to the point where if I ever do a movie of that zombie script that I wrote, I actually wrote a blind character into that story, as part of like a homage to this movie, and also if we ever do my script, I totally want to have a sighted actor playing this character, and having contacts that look exactly like hers. Because I described this in the script, because to me they look like full moons are in her eyes, like white full moons. They look so eerie. They almost look like a little planet, a little moon that's crackling. Huh. They must have been terribly uncomfortable to wear, but like that's what they look like. They look amazing.
Well, yeah.
So I guess that was also Fulci's kind of way of suggesting the blindness that she has is not normal. It came from something. There's a lot of, oh, by the way, there's a lot of hard cuts in this movie. It's really edited weird. Like, we'll go from some horrible murder sequence to hard cut the coroner scene or the library scene, or, Katerina McCall having lunch with Dr. John McCabe in a restaurant that has live jazz, and they can talk and hear each other. By the way, I mean, side note real quick before we move on, I don't know about you, Kevin, I hate it when there's live music at a restaurant. Like, how do you feel about that? Because I go to a restaurant to eat and talk with people. I do not go to a restaurant to get a concert by a crappy band who is way too loud and I can't hear anybody.
At a restaurant, you may be right. That's more for like a bar, a pub of some type. Not so much a regular restaurant. But I hate to admit that I have been to some restaurants that have had bands play. This one, you know what? Before I even forget, because I don't want to forget, this is very important, especially for someone who has not seen nearly as many Italian films as I have, that the harsh cutting and the editing style was prevalent in all Italian films in the
Really?
70s, 80s. Yes, that is something that is, whether it was in their westerns, in their dramas, or in their giallo films or horror films. That's the kind of style that they had. You get used to it after a while, and that's why it didn't dawn on me until you mentioned it that it was jarring for you. And you're right,
Yeah,
it is jarring.
it is.
Even for the 80s, the Italian cinema, because it was really prevalent in the 80s, had a different way of editing movies. And they had a different way of filming their movies. It was so different from American films of this exact same era, and which is why, despite the post dub that was known for the films, there's other elements in Italian films that are very different from American films, and you would always know the difference between the two. Now, there were some movies in which they tried to emulate as much as possible American cinema.
Yeah.
Those are less likely to be bigger films, but there were a lot of them back then too.
One of the things that you notice is signs that are clearly written in English by someone who cannot speak English. like the coroner's office, when Joe the plumber, who has this very Italian looking old frumpy wife and a pigtailed little redhead for a daughter. I don't know what universe that makes any sense, but anyway, they go to his his body to dress him for funeral. I guess that, again, that's probably a very European thing to do. But like, she tells her daughter, stay right there, and the sign right above the coroner says, "Do not entry." Do not entry. Yes, this is an American movie, quote unquote.
Yeah. You get used to it.
Yeah. But this coroner's office is very strange. It is very white. It is the whitest room this side of THX 1138. And it's got like 3 or 4 bodies just laying there, which must be very claustrophobic.
Oh.
And it's got acid on the freaking shelves for reasons. And this is probably where the first like big, disturbing, disgusting sequence of this movie happens, where so like, I'm not even sure there is a well, yeah, there are 2 zombies in this, but something happens. Let me refer to my notes because my memory of this is awkward. Okay. So it looks like the wife is preparing poor Joe the plumber for a funeral. Like, she cuts off his clothes. He's already been stitched up by the coroner who just left. And like, she's putting him on a nice suit and tie. And then it looks like, and then his wife screams at something. And then little pigtail girl, Jill is her name, comes in to see what's going on with mom. And mom is lying on the floor, apparently dead. And the acid jar has fallen over, and her face is just slowly getting dissolved by this acid that is creating a red pool of acid blood that is kind of reminiscent of the Blob.
It's slowly creeping towards the little girl.
Slowly creeping towards her. I mean, it's so upsetting. And it's just like, and the sound effects that are underneath it, and she does not get out the door for reasons, and she just kind of moves along the wall, and then bam, it's a zombie in the closet. Scream, freeze frame. We do not know what happens to Jill until the funeral of both her parents, and we find out as she slowly walks away from the priest who says, "Courage, my child," that she is now blind. She's got the white eyes that Emily has. What does this mean? We don't know. We'll find out later, because we do see Jill later. Oh my gosh, do we ever see her later? But then after that, we learned that Katerina Call has been going from job to job. She tells her origin story.
Yeah.
by the way, I got some notes from a YouTube interview with Katerina McCall. She talked about what it was like to be directed by Fulci. And she should know she did it like 3 or 4 times. She said that he's kind of like George Lucas in that he's not a good director of actors.
Yeah.
Fulci never told her that anything she ever did was good or bad. She said he would just like shake his head seriously if it was to his liking. And that's it. And I have to say, like, if only dear Lucio Fulci had ever bothered to respect the craft of acting and learn to actually friggin' direct actors. Like, even not even like a great, like, I mean, I don't demand Scorsese level engagement. Just like freaking Sergio Leone in his later films had like great performances by guys like Rod Steiger and James Coburn and even like Al Pacino Once Upon a Time in America. If he just bothered to freaking let his actors like get the best out of their performances instead of just having them be like stand-ins and like models saying words, I think his films probably would have been more famous earlier. But he saw actors as adult kind of the same way that. Oh no, he didn't just. I'm sorry, I only say that as a Hitchcock kind of homage. From another actor who worked with him said that he didn't really consider actors cattle. He considered them like bitches and dogs. Like he would call the male actors dogs, and he would call the female actresses bitches.
Damn, I didn't know that.
Like this is actually in the interview with the girl who plays Emily. She says like she would say like she said that Fulci would say, "Oh, Emily, you're such a bitch, but you're amazing. Like you're an amazing actress."
Wow. Well,
yeah.
Well, the thing about Fulci, and I've kind of forgiven him for a lot of this, is his. You're right. He's just like George Lucas in that he's a technical director, and not so much an actor's director. Unfortunately, unlike Lucas, who stopped directing when he realized that, Fulci kept directing more movies.
I think he felt like he had something to prove. I think Fulci really felt like galvanized by the success of Zombie and The Beyond and City of the Living Dead. I think he really felt like after, and we'll talk about this later, but like it seems like his career kind of falls off after New York Ripper, because after that he does Manhattan Baby and a couple other that just don't do very well. Like the mid '80s were not good for him, and he never really recovered.
No. Oh my God. I think he did Murder Rock too.
I didn't know he was involved in that at all.
I'm getting them confused now. It just dawned on certain films I've only ever seen once because I thought they were that bad.
Apparently, speaking of Emily, the actress playing Emily, like he didn't just call her the females bitches. He also had like nicknames for everybody too.
Oh,
for her nickname was the Italian word for fox, because Fulci said that she had a very long, pointy fox-like face. So like that was his nickname for her. He called her Fox.
Wow.
Yeah. I guess in Italy you also kind of have this kind of culture of brutal honesty. Like Spain, it's even worse. In Spain, though, like nobody calls anybody by their name. They just call you by your nickname, and it's often very rude, like skinny or booger or like baldy or something like that. Like that's something I learned in college when I took Spanish.
And by the way, Murder Rock, which was on my brain as being a horrible movie, is but one of Fulci's movies. It's one of the movies of his I only saw once. I was like, oh God, this is pretty fucking bad. And that was only 3 years after friggin' The Beyond. I thought it was much further along. I really did. I was like,
wow.
Well, no, I agree with you. Once he started doing after New York Ripper with the Manhattan Baby, you had reminded me about Manhattan Baby. It's like, oh yeah, that wasn't that good either. Shit, I forgot about that one. There's a reason why I forgot about it.
So like other things happen at this point where like the Shrike painting is found. They find the key. There's the one room, Shrike's room. And like there's several sequences in there that are just terrifying. I think like he really like my gosh, I feel like Fulci really was like building suspense really well in some of these sequences. I mean, like people consider him the godfather of gore and all that, and that's right. But people forget that he did a lot of very Hitchcockian suspense things, and this is part of that. And I think he does both those things very well. Um, and it's also the scene where McCall finds out the history of the hotel, and we get any indication that Shrike is sort of evil. Maybe is Emily tells her that Shrike was doing some black magic, and all the people in the hotel disappeared in one night. That's it. That is all we know about what happened. And so maybe something went wrong with his conjuring. I don't know. But maybe real quick we can talk about. I was telling you earlier how this movie may very well be loosely based on a true story. This is the part where I talk about that. Real brief, because I think this is fascinating. And credit to In Praise of Shadows. This is where I get most of this information.
Okay.
But this is so that if you're listening, go ahead and after you're done with listening to our pod, go and watch that video by In Praise of Shadows about the cosmic horror of the beyond. So apparently in In Praise of Shadows, he says that this movie may very well have been loosely based on the true story of Madame Delphine Lalorde, who had a house in New Orleans in the turn of the century, back when slavery was still legal. Actually, it's like the late 1800s. Oh, here it is. Somewhere between 1833 and 1834, a 12-year-old slave named Leah fell from her 2-story roof, kind of like how Larry fell, onto Royal Street and died. The cops investigated and questioned the madam and her husband and said that the slave was combing her hair, combing Lorraine's madam's hair, and hit a snag, and she hit Leah. Leah got scared, ran, and she chased Leah, and that's how she fell off. She chased her off the balcony. So, by the way, trigger warnings for anyone who was like really triggered by like sound like stories of like abuse, and because this story just gets worse from here. The husband also basically told them to back off, don't meddle in other people's affairs. I don't know why I made him sound like he's from New England, but anyway. The cops then noticed that, so the account says that the cops noticed that the other slaves in the house looked really malnourished, even for slaves, and thought something strange is going on here. So they do some more investigating, and they discover that, well, they don't discover anything at first, but then there's a fire. And it turns out the fire was started by a slave who was chained to the stove. And the slave had started the fire, the kitchen stove, started the fire because she was trying to kill herself. Because she said that Madame Lorraine would not only torture her slaves, but she would do things like break their bones and reset them so that they would be crab walking around.
Oh.
And that the ones she really didn't like, she would take up to the top floor, and those slaves never came back. And allegedly, she also performed black magic rites up there. And so the laws around slavery were so loose back then that the cops couldn't really do anything. But then that fire happens, April 10th, and the slaves' quarters almost all get burned to the ground. But that's when the townspeople get involved in this. They now see the horror of what the treatment of these people firsthand. And they literally just kind of become an angry mob and break down her house. And unlike Shrike, they don't take her and kill her. They run her out of town and like almost destroy her property completely. All the slaves get released. And we don't know exactly what happened to Madame Lorraine and her wife. I'm sorry, and her husband. Stories say that they went back to France and lived out the rest of their days there. Another account says that they're, so there's all kinds of crazy stuff about this house. Like, it wasn't burned to the ground completely; it was rebuilt. In fact, that mansion was it was a hotel at one point, just like this place. It was a bed and breakfast, in fact. And at one point, Nicolas Cage owned it.
One of his many properties, I'm sure.
That got seized by the bank after he had those financial troubles. So, like, I don't know if I entirely buy that this was in Fulci's mind as he was writing this, but I think, but that is because Shrike says, "I am the only one who could save you." I think that does kind of lead credence to this idea. Oh, sorry. In Praise of Darkness, he says that he mentions that story because he thinks that one of the themes of this film is, since it's a haunted house story, it's about this idea of a place that can be tainted by the memory of something awful that happened. That sometimes an atrocity happens on a space on Earth, and people should remember that, no matter what it is. And sometimes ghost stories exist to help us remember those things.
Sounds like you're stepping into Ju-on territory.
Oh, really? I haven't actually.
Huh?
I saw The Ring. I haven't seen Ju-on.
You have not seen Ju-on or The Grudge or any like 20 films in that series yet?
I wasn't a huge fan of the aside from The Ring, the Japanese, the American remakes of stuff I wasn't a huge fan of. But I mean, I do love a lot of other J horrors, but specifically like Ringu and Pulse and Ghost Actress, which is a really obscure film that I highly recommend. But yeah, I mean, I love J horror, but not the mainstream stuff. I like the hardcore stuff. You know,
Ju-on is as far from mainstream as you could start. Considering there's like 15 of them, maybe a little less now.
Man, yes.
Huh?
But like, so at this point, then I think it's actually her. Carrie McCall has the guy who's renovating the hotel. He goes to the library to figure out where the original blueprints to this hotel are, so we can get started on ripping out that basement and stuff like that. And that's, of course, Fulci's cameo as the librarian who goes on lunch for an hour. And then we have this weird thing where thunder and lightning happen in the middle of a sunny day. There's a lot of thunder and lightning in this movie in improbable places, and that's where we get this sequence. Because this poor guy falls off the ladder, and we think he's dead, but he's just paralyzed. So you seem to really like this sequence. I think
it's fun. It's a fun sequence that is completely crazy and illogical, and it just happens to spiders just kind of gouge themselves into this guy who is paralyzed and can't do anything. Now, how ridiculous is that?
It is. It is. I think here's the thing. Here's my. I said I had opinions. Here's my opinion.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
I think that this is probably the one sequence in the whole movie that doesn't really work for only one reason, and that is for me. In order for this to really get under my skin and work, there's two things that have to be really firing on all 8 cylinders. Number one is the editing, and number two is the special effects. And neither of those things really work, because I feel like this is the one instance where Fulci's lingering camera kind of works against him, because the shots go on for way too long, and the special effects some of them are great, some of them aren't so great. You can totally tell when it's a fake eye. You can totally tell when it's a fake tarantula. You can totally tell when it's a real tarantula, and that to me just takes me out of the whole thing. It's not even faking this in a dreamy sense. It's just faking this in a cheap looking sense. I mean, there's, like I said, there's some parts of it that are great, but like if he just edited it, took one more editing pass on that sequence, made it shorter, cut out some of the badder special effects, it would have been a whole lot more effective. I know it sounds heretical to say, but this is probably one instance where Fulci should have been like, maybe less is more here.
I won't disagree with you, but the thing is, you saw it within the last 3 years. I saw the movie in like the end of the 80s.
So this is entirely intact in the truncated version you saw.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. The thing is, the ideal behind such ludicrousness for me is the reason why Italian films. I've seen so many of them. They all are ridiculous to me now. But when I started watching them, and especially the Giallo in the '90s, I started watching a lot of the older ones. And catching up with movies I hadn't seen. I kind of realized that was part of the charm of Italian cinema back then. They're all kind of freaking ludicrous the way they did them. Especially in Giallo films, where they hold on the black gloved killer for longer than they ever should, and you don't really take, in my opinion. And this is the reason why I enjoy this movie, and I keep saying it's a dream logic for me. Like, it's pretty much all ridiculous to me now. When I was a kid, the spider sequence was cool. It's like, shit, the dude's getting killed by a bunch of spiders. Oh, I ain't seen that one before. This is things that you wouldn't have seen in American films back then, because American films were much more logic based. Even in the 80s, the 80s, end of 80s, they're more logic based. In Italian films, there is very little logic. They would come up with some of the craziest ideals for their giallo films and their horror films and throw everything at the audience and hope that it elicited a response that people would actually either be scared or it would be gore filled. Like you said before, Fulci was known for gore films. He became a gore master, and this is sad to say that he's only remembered for these gore films. He did so much other films out there. Crime movies. He did his erotic movies before he even started doing those films. He did westerns. He did a lot of stuff, but he's only remembered for his gore films. That's sad, but it's the truth.
It is, but we can hope that at least people will use those films as a gateway to some others. Like, this is probably getting ahead of myself, but Tarantino is a big fan of this movie. But he says that Fulci's best movie is The Psychic, otherwise known as The Seven Death Notes.
Yep.
So we should probably put that on our list too.
Have you seen it? It's a good movie.
I have not seen The Psychic. It's on my queue.
The thing is, there are a lot of his films where he is very subtle with the horror aspects because he was much more controlled as a director. The Psychic is one of those. It's not the only one. It's one of the ones that he's done. And I've not seen all of his movies. By no means. There are so many films of his that are so hard to find as an American or NTSC version. There's PAL versions of all of his shit. But I don't have an international DVD player to play his freaking PAL stuff. So
one of these days, one of those. One of these days.
One day I'm going to get one so I can watch all of his movies, because there are a ton. And I've seen some of his westerns. I've seen some of his erotic movies. I've seen a little bit of everything he's ever done. It's great that The Beyond is one of his most widely seen films. I think it's more widely seen and widely known than even Zombie is. I think because Zombie is just called Zombie or Zombie 2, it's too generic. A lot of people forget that one exists. The Beyond has had a greater effect on not just horror fans, but general film fans and general cult film fans. That's probably because of Tarantino talking it up more so than any of his other films.
And also, the oh gosh, what was I going to say? So, like I was going to say, you mentioned like the generic title of Zombie working against it. Although I do like the British title of Zombie better. They called it Zombie Flesh Eaters.
Yes.
That is probably the best title for this. The actual title for The Beyond is a sentence. It's not The Seven Doors of Death or even The Beyond. It's literally, if you translate the original Italian title, it is, "And you will live in terror, the afterlife."
Really? I've never known that. Wow. Okay, that's a new one on me.
Yeah, it is in the movie. If you watch the the full director's cut, the credits are in Italian, and it does have the original title, Utilitari. I can't even pronounce it in Italian, but the word for the beyond is also translated the afterlife. So that is why, this movie is ostensibly about hell. Sorry, about the idea of hell and what hell might be like. And we'll get into that in just a minute, because we have one thing, and that does set up something for the ending.
Okay.
What I do like about the spider sequence is that even though, like you said, it's weird, it's disgusting, it's gross, it's over the top. Yes, I like everything in this, but it also sets up something. The way it ends with this incongruous, he sees the blueprints, he sees the plans, he sees basically the skeleton of this hotel, if you will, and then they vanish. Like, the spiders eat him, and then they vanish. Yeah. Although I think you could probably infer that what's left of his body probably vanishes too, as Fulci's character went out to lunch. There is no way those spiders ate him in less than half an hour. So I think that when Fulci's character came back, he saw nothing but a ladder on the floor. What this scene tells us, though, is that that Shrike, or maybe more accurately, the evil behind Shrike's body, because I think that's what really happened. My take on it is that Shrike was not evil. He was trying to save the world. The guys killed him. Shrike's soul goes away to wherever, but the evil he was trying to prevent from entering the world through the 7 gates of hell, from then on, uses Shrike's body and his powers as a vessel to bring the horror and the zombies and the curse of that horrible act into this world. It's not really Shrek. It's just a vessel. And this vessel can do one very important thing in this spider scene, is alter reality.
Yeah, which you see later in the film too.
Which you see later, exactly. My point. That's why this whole thing seems to come out of nowhere. But what's genius is that it actually sets up. It makes the ending seem less out of nowhere because of that. Because we build to it through the whole time. We're building to it and building to it by more people dying. Joe the plumber comes back. He rises out of the tub to kill the lady caretaker in one of the best eye gouging sequences, because it is a reverse eye gouge instead of the instrument for the eye gouging coming in front of the eye. She gets her head rammed through the spike that crucified Shrike to the back of her head, and the eye comes out her socket. Yikes. Also interesting note that the sound effect they used for the dripping of her blood is the same sound effect they use for the dripping of water when Joe the plumber's working.
Are you sure? Oh my god.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of funny. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, side note, all the zombies in Fulci's movies are either dry as a bone, near mummification, or they are soaking wet. There's no in between. He likes doggy zombies for reasons. So that happens. Weird stuff happens in the coroner's office because they find Shrike's body, or rather Joe the plumber found it, and put him in the coroner's place. And there's this weird subplot that doesn't really go anywhere, where Dr. John McCabe's buddy, who has this epic-looking Robert Redford mustache, is doing brainwave research on corpses for reasons. And he hooks up Shrike's brain to the thing, and he starts going boop, 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 without him looking at it, which is a cool little suspense thing, but like I said, it doesn't really go anywhere. Actually, we'll get into it later, but that guy appears again later on in the movie, and you could cut him out, and you would lose absolutely nothing. I don't know why he's even there. But remember why I said Dickie, the dog, is not a good boy? This is why. Because Shrek comes back with all the people he's murdered up until this point, and basically ambushes poor Emily.
Yep.
And she sees him. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. Please, I didn't tell anybody. So apparently she wasn't supposed to tell Katerina Call.
Yeah.
And so her punishment is to be destroyed by them. But she, and I don't think we've ever seen this in any other movie, like, she sicks her dog, Vicky, on Shrike. So we have a zombie versus dog fight. Zombie had zombie versus shark. This one is zombie versus German Shepherd. And it seems like the German Shepherd is winning. Well, this all-powerful warlock zombie is getting his butt handed to him by a German Shepherd. And then there's this long pause. And then something happens that's very upsetting. I'm not sure what we're expected to believe here, because it seems to me that either, like, she says, good boy, good boy. She thinks that the dog has destroyed Shrike.
Yeah.
But then the dog attacks her, rips her friggin' throat out and her ear, which is, speak no evil, hear no evil. And that's how she dies again. Because the implication is she's been dead before. Because we saw her at the beginning of the movie. And I guess that's how she's going to go back to hell. So, I'm not sure whether we're expected to believe that Shrike can mind control the living, or that this is a zombie dog we're talking here. I prefer to think zombie dog. I don't know about you.
I never thought about it as a zombie dog. I just thought that he took control over the dog and sicked the dog on her. Or the dog was infected with the evil, his evil, and turned on its master. That's all I kind of thought about the sequence. But being a zombie dog makes it much more interesting to think about.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that's probably what happened to Jill, because of what happens to her later. By the way, you mentioned Suspiria earlier. I think that it can't be a coincidence that both Suspiria and this movie feature a seeing eye dog killing its owner.
I didn't think about that either until now.
I mean, the only difference is in Suspiria, it's a dude who's blind gets killed by a seeing eye dog, and in this movie, it's a woman who gets killed by a seeing eye. That's the only difference. Aside from there being zombies, but that's beside the point.
Maybe Italians didn't like seeing eye dogs and seeing eye people. I don't know.
That was terrible. Although I will say, I didn't like. Apparently, Lucio Fulci at the time he made this hated Argento.
Yeah,
did not like him at all. But apparently, for what would have been his last movie, he buried the hatchet, pun intended, with Dario Argento, and he was going to collaborate with Argento on a movie called Wax Mask.
Yeah, did you see it?
I saw it and it was pretty good, but I all the time I'm watching it, I'm thinking, man, I wish I could have seen what Fulci would have done with this, though. Yeah.
I had been told I should rewatch it. I had only saw it when it originally came out. I have not seen it since then. I didn't care for it when it originally came out. I just have not bothered to reevaluate it.
It's very, very interesting. I mean, if you think about it as a giallo, the effects work on it is pretty amazing. And the third act, the meltdown sequence, is pretty awesome. I think some people probably get turned off by mild spoilers, but they did turned off by the whole automaton part of the story, which looks very Terminator-ish. But yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, I remember liking it, and like I said, I really wish Fulci had lived long enough to make that. I think that would have been an interesting collaboration.
I think it would be a great comeback film. I really do. And that's what he was designed as. He hadn't directed anything in years, and so it was and he hadn't acquired the cult following he now has when it came.
I think the cult of Fulci didn't really start until the Blu-ray and DVD releases of the director's cuts of Zombie and this movie. I think that happened around the early 2000s.
Whenever Quentin Tarantino got a hold of it and re-released it at theaters, I don't remember when it was.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I wish I had the opportunity to watch The Beyond at the Plaza Theater in Atlanta last year. They were showing what's called the composer's cut of the movie, because apparently Fabio Fabrizi edited a new version of the movie with like the extended versions of his musical cues.
Huh.
I was like, what? Dang.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've heard the soundtrack to this movie, but it's pretty dope. You have
I have a version of the soundtrack of this. I don't have a full version of the soundtrack. It's probably the doors of death cues. I forget.
the version I heard on YouTube that I played pretty much on a loop when I was writing my zombie movie script has a full church choir version of the main theme of this movie. That whole thing with a choir.
Interesting.
Dude, you have not lived until you have heard that through headphones. It's gorgeous and terrifying at the same time. It's so elating. But yeah, so, well, after this, Arthur the Mouth Breather. Oh, yeah. One of the three people who own the hotel. I call him Arthur the Mouth Breather because he looks like it. He gets wait, now a zombie attacks him. Zombie attacks her. We have other stuff happens. Oh, Lisa goes to Liza. That's her name.
Liza.
That's Katarina McCall's character name is Liza.
Liza.
She keeps going to Dr. McCabe saying, I saw, oh yeah, she keeps seeing the book of Abion. She keeps seeing the book of Abion all over the place as if it wants to be discovered by her. And then when she finally does, she reads it. And this is a strange little exchange between Dr. McCabe, like, maybe you're crazy, maybe you're not. I'll read the book you sent me. So she gives the book to him, which probably seals his doom, now that I think about it. But, like, who are you? What did I write here? I don't know how to write words, apparently. Who are you really? Oh! So, yeah, this is, like, right when we get to the third act. Like, McCabe starts putting things together, but he doesn't believe because he's a scientist.
He's a doctor.
He's a doctor. He's a man of science. He can't rationalize this stuff. But then but there's a strange little scene where he's like confronting her, and he says, "Who are you really?" And she's like, "Why are you asking me such a thing? Like, what the f are you talking about?" He says this all dramatically. Like, he says, "If that book is true, then this hotel is standing on top of one of the 7 gateways to hell. Boom! Thunder! Inside! Lightning!" And this is where we start the third act of this movie. The last 10 freaking minutes. Is it 10 minutes? It's more like 20 minutes. But anyway. Oh, no. I timed it. It's 20 minutes. And this is probably like the thing you've been waiting for. This whole sequence leading up to the amazing ending, I think, is also pretty amazing. It's
fast paced too.
It is fast paced, yeah. There's no filler anywhere.
No.
And because like from then on, they're like on a chase to escape what's going on. But I want to before we go into that though, I want to be like, because like interrogate that little line for a little moment, because I wonder if it wasn't part of some earlier draft where like maybe they were more explicit about Liza's family having connections to the killers of Shrike.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Because I like to think, what if she wasn't just somebody in the wrong place at the wrong time? What if it wasn't chance that she got the hotel? What if she was descended from one of the people who crucified and quick-blind that guy? In fact, wouldn't it be interesting if like all of the people who die in this movie are in some way related to that mob? I mean, they all live in the same town.
Yeah, you're right. Huh.
There's no reason to think that they couldn't be. So I think that's probably why he asked that question. It's like, who are you really? Well, maybe she is the great-great-great-granddaughter of the dude who was mixing that bucket and poured that quicklime / acid all over his freaking face. And that's why he wants to acidize freaking, Joe the plumber's wife and, gouge people's eyes out and stuff like that, because that's his revenge. Or at least that's the That's the evil's revenge. I don't know. I guess that idea kind of falls apart if you go by my interpretation. That's not really Strike's soul. It's the evil that wants the gates open. I don't know. But that's one of the great things about this movie, though. This is not incoherency. This is in interpretation. Like all dreams and nightmares is subject to interpretation. You could take this thing apart and try to figure it out, and you never will. But it's fun to try.
Well, and that's why I say this is one of his more accessible films, despite the fact it's inaccessible.
Really? You think more accessible?
I do, because it's a much more engaging film. For me, this is one of his more engaging films. It's kind of like not House by the Cemetery, the other one, City of the Living Dead. The thing about City of the Living Dead is that the image of the dead priest throughout the whole film is just a striking image, and it stays with you the entire film. Dr. Freudstein in House by the Cemetery is not, in my opinion, one of the worst zombies that was created for a Fulci movie.
Yeah, stupid. I hate that freaking. Ugh.
Yeah, I've never liked the look, and this is the reason why I don't watch that movie that often. I watch them when I watch all three of them when I'm in the mood, but I don't really watch that one by itself. With this one, there's just something about it that, because of the logic or non-logic or dream logic, however you want to put it, there's something that people gravitate towards where the skeptic, which would be the doctor, and then you have the Liza, who becomes a true believer after everything she's seen with Emily, who's blind, and these people who keep dropping like flies from her hotel, so on and so forth. She keeps having these nightmares, seeing this book. She doesn't know what it means, and then of course, like I saw this like. As I got older, and I've seen the movie multiple times, I always kind of see the Mulder and Scully type thing with this. They're trying to figure out what the hell's going on, but they can't.
Yeah, no, I think what makes I forgot to mention this earlier, but I think part of what turns Liza into a believer in something weird is happening here is when the last time she sees Emily and she runs away, she notices that Emily's footsteps do not make a sound.
Oh yeah, that's right.
In fact, watch that scene again when Emily gets in. Emily, watch any scene she's in. You do not ever hear her footsteps in any scene.
Really?
Yes, you never see it. I mean, Fulci will actually does have a flashback, and like he shows you that same footage like twice, just so you can get it. But yeah, her like when Liza figures it out, she has a moment where she stops and thinks, like, wait a minute. She doesn't say, in an American movie, she would say this out loud, but in an Italian movie, you just see the image you see inside her head. So yeah, I think that's the first thing she realizes, wait a minute, she's not really here fully. She's like a ghost, which is kind of a running thing through the Gates of Hell trilogy, I think. I don't know if they keep this up in House by the Cemetery, but it seems like the zombies in these three movies exhibit more traits of the classical ghosts.
They do.
Okay, so it seems like that's a main thing that he tries to do. It's much more prevalent in City of the Living Dead, because the freaking ghosts can have superpowers. Sorry, the zombies have superpowers in that movie, but that makes them behave more like ghosts, which I think is a pretty cool idea. And I have another, project, script that would be good for too. I'd love to try that. Because I don't think there's been an American movie that has something like that, unless you're talking like, Sam Raimi stuff. But Sam Raimi's, they're not really zombies; those are deadites. That's a whole other thing altogether.
Well, I will say this: Italian zombies are very different from American zombies, as we discussed with even Fulci's Zombie. There were zombies that were freaking skeletons coming out of graves, and if you their idea, even if you watch some of the other zombie movies, Zombie 3 and 4, these fucking zombies are running and jumping and all kinds of crazy shit that you wouldn't see in an American zombie movie. And of course, the dream logic of zombies here that can appear and disappear at will. I don't think there was a logic to exactly how zombies functioned. They just kind of used them in any way that worked for the story being told.
Oh, speaking of, you actually mentioned that, you're right. They don't function the same way in this one that they do in Zombie. And one very important detail. Let me ask you this, Kevin. In this entire movie, The Beyond, do you ever see a zombie eat somebody?
No, they don't eat anybody. I mean,
Not at all. What do? They just gouge your eyes out or gouge your ears out and kill you, and then you become a zombie. They're in that sense, I guess they're almost more like the voodoo aspect of zombies, in which case the zombies are not they're not a plague per se. They are servants of a greater evil.
yeah.
And literally a wizard, an evil wizard, basically, which is what they are in voodoo. They serve a voodoo wizard. But so in this case, I think you still have that. And like we said, like I alluded to earlier, the producers of this movie wanted a zombie attack at the end of this movie, and we get that. But
Yeah.
that's not what he wanted originally. Originally, he wanted just Shrike and the people he killed to be the only zombies in this movie, which I think still would have made this movie count, because there's at least 4 people he kills. We see them in one scene, so yes, that qualifies as a classic zombie movie, and I would have been just fine with that. But the producers insisted that they have all the dead bodies in the morgue.
The
When they
morgue.
went to the morgue, come out and just start attacking. Now, granted, these are not the same quality of zombies that you got in Zombie at all, which I was kind of disappointed in, to be honest. But at least they move the same way. You know, they still have that slow sleepwalk to them, which is fine. I appreciate that. That's scary. But what makes that sequence more scary is not the zombies or what they do. It's the atmosphere.
It is.
Because as soon as they're in the basement, they say they see the portal. They see we don't see what they see though, but they see something that's in the basement, and they run. Katarina McCall and John McCabe are running, and they get out. They run out of the hotel. And Kevin, I gotta tell you, that shot is to me the scariest scene in the whole movie, because that shot is the scene where I realized Fulci's a lingering camera, because it's just a shot of the hotel, and it's night, and each room is lit in like a different color, and the 2 leads run out, get in his car, drive away. The camera does not follow them. It stays on the house for like 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and then in the windows you see the shifting shadows of zombies coming out and just kind of wandering around, and you hear the voices and and oh my gosh, that to me was terrifying, because that is like, it's almost like, because he stays there and lingers on something you do not want to see, it's almost like it made me for a second almost feel like I wasn't watching a movie, like I was just there walking along the street at night observing this thing happen, and I did not want to be there, but I couldn't move because Fulci's camera kept me there looking at the horror of that thing that I can't know that's behind those curtains. Like, I mean, like, also, like, I'm just realizing this, that, like, an image like that is probably more true to people's actual reported experiences of the supernatural. Like, you see a ghost, what you think is a ghost, but you might see it in another room, or you might see it in the dark in the woods. You might see it briefly. There's like a distance usually between you and it. I mean, people's experience vary, obviously, but like, that is something I imagine I might actually see. And then the next morning, somebody might say, "Oh, that was something else." Rather, like John McCabe does to poor Eliza in this movie. You know, oh, there's a rational explanation for all this, obviously, but no, I know what I saw. But I think that moment kind of feels more. It's still part of the dream imagery of this movie, but at the same time, it feels authentic to that sort of uncanny experience. That's the word I was looking for. It's uncanny. It's uncanny. But then they move. They're running, and the first thing that they notice that's weird, though, is like when they're going through the city, there's nobody there. She's like, there's not a soul here. And that's your first clue, ladies and gentlemen, that something ain't right with the world they are now in. But it looks just like everything else, doesn't it? Although they go into the, I did notice that, like, you go into the corridor of the hospital, and the room and the window at the end is now a different color. It's now, I think, blue. Did I write that down? Yeah, because it used to be white, even at night, but now it's blue. So that should be your first clue that something ain't right. But what's funny to me about this whole setup to this sequence, though, is like Dr. McCabe is driving the car, and she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And he's like, "We have to get to the FBI."
He's still the logical one.
I know, but it's like, it's not logical. But it's like, what are you gonna tell the feds? What are you gonna tell the feds? What is gonna be? I want to know what would have been his. It's one of those things. I can't even friggin' think about what he could have possibly said. Like, I can't even. Just like, I want y'all at home who are listening to this to imagine what John McCabe's report to the federal FBI would have been like. How could he report on this? And then, like, email it to us on our Patreon page or whatever, because that might be hilarious. But like, he gets in there, and the horse is crawling with zombies. It's a tour de force of zombie mayhem. He's got a gun. Thank God he has a gun. But he sucks at shooting, apparently.
Yeah.
And
he does nothing.
And he doesn't know the rules of zombies, which is fine because logical. He wouldn't. But he gets a couple of lucky shots. But what I think is funny is, like, he gets the lucky shots and just a little bit of blood happens on their heads. And if he gets a headshot, the zombie goes down. And then he starts to figure that out, kind of. But, so they keep going, and they're trying to find, I think he said, he's trying to find his colleague, yep. Mr. Whose name I can't remember, but I will call him Rubber Redford Mustache Man. Okay. So Rubber Mustache Man, who is doing brainwave experiments, but he finally finds him, and he's like, I don't know what's going on. And then he tries to rescue Mustache Man, but instead he ends up blowing a window, and the glass kind of impales Mustache Man's face, and he is dead. And McCabe does absolutely this horror does nothing to him. He just moves on.
Yep.
I feel like you could have seen the movie and it would have lost absolutely nothing. But what's cool, I think, is like they keep trying to get out. They find Jill. Oh, poor child. And they take Jill with them. And I think it's the most hilarious moment of unintentional comedy is when they're getting into the elevator with Jill, and he's reloading his gun. And if the behind the scenes information of this movie is to be believed, the actor playing John McCabe pulled a practical joke on Fulci because apparently he didn't like Fulci very much. So the practical joke was he intentionally screwed up a take by attempting to load his gun like it was a freaking musket from the 1700s by putting the bullet through the barrel as the door is closing. And apparently Katarina McCall thought this was hilarious and starts laughing. And if you're looking very closely, you can see her start to laugh.
Oh my God.
Because that take is in the movie.
That's funny.
Because Fulci apparently didn't notice.
Oh, wow. That's how much he was paying attention to. Jesus.
Yeah, he did not notice. But like they try to get out. They're shooting. They're just he's just like Danny DeVito style blasting. And what happens next? Let's see. Just before, yes, they're in the main place where Shrike's body would be, surrounded by zombies, and then all of a sudden, freaking Jill goes feral on them and grabs Katerina Call's face and starts to try to kill her. I guess he's going to try and gouge her eyes out. But, oh man. Oh man. So at this point, like I said, we have been seeing little bits of blood here and there on zombies' heads, on the shots he's doing with his little magnum pistol. But when McCabe comes in and saves Liza from, I guess, zombie Jill now.
Yep.
What we get is the most freaking amazing zombie head explosion in the entire 80s. He's just like, and her head, this little pigtailed redhead girl's head just like jerks back and becomes like a bowl of blood just sloshing. And it's an amazing effect because you are not expecting it.
Oh.
You're not expecting something so realistic, and then because like all up until then it's been and then kablam. It was like Schwarzenegger worthy. Like he's looking at her like I would encourage you, if you're gonna make like a gag out of this section of the podcast, you can edit my Schwarzenegger impressions here, because there's so many Schwarzenegger-esque lines you could put before this kill. Like, oh, what did I write here? Because these are classic.
You wrote some?
Give me a second, edit out this pause, because these are classic. Just imagine like the pause before he pulls the trigger and her head, and insert these lines. All right, here we go. So like he points. Gingers have no soul or brains.
The funny
Number
thing,
two.
Okay, keep going.
Number two. I got three. Number two. Hey, Jill. That's a little Mr. Freezy. Hey, Jill. And finally, last but not least, eat lead, Pippi Longstocking.
Oh my God. Oh man, good thing you were writing movies in the 80s.
So after that, I mean, my gosh, I could go on and on about that, because it's such a great effect. But like the next thing that happens, oh man, here comes Shrike the zombie. And now we think that he's gotten so good at shooting, all of a sudden he loses every aiming function in his brain. He cannot shoot Shrike in the head. The only thing that makes any sense to me is that like Shrike is somehow like messing with McCabe's brain and like has destroyed his targeting functioning. That's the only thing I could think of. That's the only thing that makes any sense. So like he runs out of bullets and Shrike is there and they just run from him.
Yep.
Moment they do, they run back into the elevator. And it's this brilliant, simple effect. Like you reconstruct the door frame of the hospital, but it leads right into the spiral staircase back to the basement.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get back here? Because we know from the spider sequence, reality has been manipulated.
Yep, I tell you, set up.
Or, and this is probably more my interpretation though, or the moment they were down in the basement the first time, they went through the portal and they were already in hell. That's the reason why you did not see anybody, because there was nobody to be seen. Because all that they were seeing was hell's version of their world. And I think that's the idea that maybe Fulci was trying to get across, or at the very least, I think he invites that interpretation, which is the idea that hell is basically our world, the material world, minus light, minus life, minus humanity, minus the sun, minus what they call in theology, Christian theology, minus something called common grace. minus the common grace that God offers that to all people. The sun shines on both the wicked and the righteous. That's called common grace. But hell would have none of that. But it would look very much like the world you are. Kind of like another great example, I think, is the Upside Down from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That is, I think, a very accurate depiction of that idea of what hell really is like. It is the underworld, which is just a horrific reflection of ours without any grace. And that idea is like one of the main driving themes of I love that theme so much that I kind of ran with that for my zombie scripts. So again, this movie's DNA just like wrote itself all over my brain. And that takes us to that ending that so affected you and that still affects us, is they realize they have nowhere to go except forward. And once they do, what do they see, Kevin? What do they see?
They find themselves in the beyond. And blind, among other things.
Well, what's funny is like the pacing of that too.
It's very slow. It's deliberate.
It's like they're in water. It's like they're in water. It's like they're going through water. Also, like what they see, which by the way, I think I read somewhere like what were they supposed to see was very different in the original script. Do you know about this?
No, I don't.
Yeah. No, according to IMDb, the original script Fulci and his writers had was that hell looks like this big carnival. Like this hellish looking carnival. So I guess Fulci was originally intending for it to be basically a homage to Carnival of Souls.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, but the reason why they wouldn't be able to do that is because budget.
Budget?
They did not have the money. So instead, hopefully if you're listening to this point at all, you've seen it already, or at least you've seen it on the internet. But I think even if you've seen it and we tell you what it is, we can't like describe it to you. You just have to see it for yourself. But I would also argue that's not just the visual of what they see that makes it so powerful, it's the sounds. Again, like we think of Bill Fulci as a visual director, but I would argue that his soundscapes and his sound effects are a crucial aspect of what makes his movies work. Because if you were to be in that moment with those characters, I think it only really works if you're feeling it and you're feeling the sound, because the sounds show you what your eyes cannot or should not see.
Yeah.
Because when they're in that place, when they cross that threshold, they're looking at pure gray, blackish gray nothingness. I mean, the color, that color is something, again, that's something I took and put into my script. I describe it as a non-color, like a tombstone gray color. Mm-hmm. A color that's somehow luminous also, but I feel like if you were forced to stare at that color forever, you would go insane. But it's just that's just what the sky looks like. There's no fire and brimstone. There's no devils with pitchforks. There's just this landscape of gray desert and dead bodies just lying on the ground, who apparently, another fun fact, those dead bodies, mostly naked, that you see were actually just tramps that Fulci found and paid them in beer. So
why is that sound so true?
Low budget filmmakers, that's one way you can do that. So these bodies are just laying there. We assume the souls of the damned. Maybe they will be zombies later. We don't know, but we hear the souls of the damned all around, the sounds. And then we have, most movies have the voice of God. This movie has the voice of the devil, saying, and you shall, what was he saying? What is the catchphrase of this friggin' movie?
Oh my God. Now you have me thinking about it too.
Oh, and you shall, I wrote it down, man. Dang it. You can cut this part out. And you shall traverse. Dang it.
I can't remember. I can't remember. Ah!
My brain's not working right now. Okay, I got it. So a voice just comes out of nowhere and says, and you shall venture, and you shall traverse. Frack it, I'm just gonna. It's on IMDb. I could just look it up. The Sea of Darkness. Hang on. Sorry. There's like a. All right, here we go. So this is where you can edit back in.
Okay.
As Fulci has the voice of the devil, we assume, assuming there is a devil in this universe, which there may not be.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, and you will face the sea of darkness and all therein that may be explored. And then they go blind, like you said.
Yep.
And then they disappear. They just disappear. It's like, I think it's meant to be like they've become part of the set of the Sea of Darkness. The question is like, what is the Sea of Darkness? Is it the thing they're looking at? Or is it what they're looking at when they go blind? I don't know.
No, you don't know. But that's a very striking ending to the movie, and it's one that stayed with me, and I'm sure stayed with a lot of other people when they saw it in the 80s. Your interpretation obviously is going to be different because you saw it within the last 3 years. But that's kind of the way.
Is that the way you saw it when you saw it? Or?
I saw it somewhere around the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s is when I saw it. For the first time when it was Seven Doors of Death. I saw it again, probably 92 before I graduated high school. So I graduated in 95. So I thought probably in 92, 93 when I actually saw it as The Beyond when I was looking into Fulci movies. Because in 95, I did my little or actually, I may have done my screening in 94. In 94, I did my horror zombie trilogy screening at my house for Halloween.
I remember you talking about that, yeah.
And I showed Zombie at the time when I knew who Fulci was. When I originally saw The Beyond and Seven Doors of Death, I didn't know who he was. So that's why I'm saying it's somewhere at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s is when I first saw the movie, and then I saw it again after I knew who Fulci was.
So let me, so Kevin, a little bit here when we're talking about what the ending really means and all that. Let me drop some food for thought on you, and maybe you can agree or disagree with this. But and I was looking at different people's interpretations on the internet. Somebody said something really interesting. He ties in this ending to the idea of eyes. You know, this reoccurring motif of blindness. Okay. So what he's saying basically is that this movie, more than any of his other movies, makes us, the audience, and our act of seeing it part a character in the film. And the way he does it is this. So think about this. The idea of eyes in the movie, like all they do is they look, when he has close-ups of eyes in this movie, it's looking in terror and confusion. Or they're getting eaten by tarantulas, or they're getting their eyes gouged out. And this is part of Fulci's design, the guy says, and I don't have a credit here for him, but he said that, and I think I kind of agree with this, is that the design is to make you, the viewer, a character by implying that you are the main character of this story, in the way that Lovecraft stories are usually first person. Mm-hmm. Cosmic horror is most often told from first person because it's all about the subjective experience.
Correct.
Of something so horrific you can't comprehend it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to do in film because film is, by its very nature, objective.
Yes.
Because it's photographic, but Fulci, in his genius, figures out a way to make it subjective. Like, he shows us the beyond, when we get there, when we get to hell, by not showing us it, always nothing. And when we see the when the well, let's not see, but when the horror, the true horror of hell is revealed, all we see is the eyes of the people seeing it. Our main character's eyes, the eyes that go white and blind. And I gotta say, that the guy playing John McCabe, he was not a great. He didn't really give that great a performance until that last moment, because his look of shock and despair and confusion when he goes blind, it just sells that whole thing. He nailed it.
Well, that's because he's now a believer at that point.
Oh yeah, his whole world has fallen to pieces, and there's nothing he can grab onto anymore. And when Fulci's doing that, he is by implication saying that if we, the audience, were to see it, we too would go blind or die. And that to behold hell, in the strictest sense of the word, is to be sucked in and to never escape. So once you've seen it, that's all you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And Fulci taps into this primal curiosity to see the shocking violence, but from a distance. And I would add that to confront the horrific reality of our own fears about death from a safe distance. That's really and that's what seeing horror movies is, for the most part, all about, is engaging with this stuff at a distance so that we can be less afraid of it. Because once you see the beyond, the movie ends the beyond as an idea, you can't unsee it. Like the horrors the characters face, it changes them forever. So I think that's what he was getting at there.
So I am going to defer my final thoughts to that when I rewatch the movie again after having this conversation with you, because now when I rewatch it, I'm going to pay more attention to some of Fulci's eye motifs in this film. I can't say that I actually thought about that beforehand because I didn't think about this movie as being a Lovecraft movie. That being said, the concept you just brought up, I think, is most successfully executed in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness.
So it's very subjective as well. I haven't seen it all the way through. I've only seen parts of In the Mouth of Madness.
In the Mouth of Madness, because the ideal is by the end of the film, the book that the movie is based on has now been made into a Hollywood movie, of which you, the audience member, are actively watching. Therefore, you will then become as crazy as everyone else who has read the book or seen the movie.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept, and that's why I need to rewatch the movie, because I had never thought about that until now. I think In the Mouth of Madness is probably the most genius film to actually achieve something like that, but this film could also be included in that as well, in the themes, in the way that Fulci reveals it to the audience. Like I said, if I had known beforehand that I was thinking about this as a cosmic horror Lovecraftian movie when I'd seen it so many freaking times, I probably have already come to that type of conclusion, but I didn't.
Yeah. I think somebody also said that it does differ from Lovecraft's version of cosmic horror in one crucial aspect, and which is that typically in cosmic horror, the horror, the monster, the evil, the unknowable thing usually doesn't give two fracks about humanity.
No.
Or human beings at all. But in Fulci's version of cosmic horror, the evil does care, only insofar as it cares only insofar as to keep its own identity a secret. It cares when humans meddle and see it. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, so your eyes must be destroyed.
Yeah.
And of course, the eyes being the window to the soul, your soul must also be absorbed. So in that sense, they do care. And I think, and for the most part, I would agree with, obviously there's a lot of things about Lovecraft's worldview I do not agree with, but one motif philosophical motif that he does put forth in his version of cosmic horror is that I do kind of agree with, which is this idea that true evil is not hatred, but indifference.
Yeah, I'll agree with you.
Yeah, like I really do think that, like I hear in church all the time, like people like saying like the devil hates you, the devil wants to kill you and I'll destroy you. And yes, the Bible does say the devil does seek to kill and destroy. But I personally don't think that I personally think, and this is because of some other stuff I've studied, is that I don't think that the devil, the real devil, actually gives two fracks whether we live or die. I think he only cares about us, sort of similar to the evil in this movie. I think he only cares about us insofar as we are tools in his design to get back at God. we are pawns in his evil scheme, and that's really all he cares about us at all. Because there's also a parable Jesus tells, the weeds and the tares, and evil is sown into the crop that is the humanity at the beginning of the world. And an angel comes up to God and says, our enemy put evil into the crop. What do you want us to just destroy the whole thing and start over again? And it's God who says, no, let them all grow together. And at the end, I will separate them, the weeds from the tares, and they'll put the tares in the fire. And that represents the final judgment. And that whole story is meant to convey the idea of the problem of evil in Christianity. The answer to that problem of why is there evil in this world when God created a good world? Well, that's why. But it also, I think, tells me that if it weren't for God, the angels, these celestial beings, don't really care whether we live or die. Because it was the angel who said to God, you want us to just freaking annihilate them all and start all over again? And it was God who says, no, I actually care. I actually love them. I've got a plan to redeem the world. But it was the angel, and maybe it was the devil himself who said, let's just kill them all. So yeah, I do agree with Lovecraft and probably Fulci in that regard, that true evil is indifference. Because even anger towards somebody that you hate, at least is giving them something. Mm-hmm. You're giving some kind of emotional care to that person. I guess you could put it up to like the internet age. People who hate watch or hate follow. Say like you're liberal and like you follow a conservative thing online just to hate at them. Well, if you really hated them, you wouldn't even care what they say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I will add one more film to people who wanted to know about cosmic horror and the fact that the greater beings of Lovecraft don't really give two shits about us humans. I would say Frank Darabont's version of Stephen King's The Mist. The creatures in the mist don't give two shits about us. And when at the very end, when the humans realize just how large those other beings are, what do but to not want to face it, but to kill themselves, except for the one person who can't kill himself. That's one of my favorite films Frank Darabont ever did. I think it was a brilliant movie, even though people hate the ending. But that ideal of such cosmic horror and people just be unable to fathom such enormity, it's one of the things that stick with any Lovecraft film. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think about it this way in this movie. I need to reevaluate it yet again.
Yeah, just because there's not a tentacle monster in it doesn't mean it's not Lovecraftian, Kevin.
I know, but I'm so used to that. I'm gonna put on my list underwater.
It's become a cliche, I think, at this point. It's become kind of a cliche. I will say also, like I did see The Mist when it initially came out, and I need to maybe watch it again because I have conflicting thoughts about the ending. Like I could see, it's funny. The original short story that Stephen King wrote does not have that ending.
No, it doesn't. And Stephen King says he created a better ending than he could have written.
Unusual for Mr. King to say.
It is, but the short story is very short. The movie version or that movie version does so much with so little. And Frank Darabont, as both a writer, producer, director, does that with every one of Stephen King's stories he's adapted. He's taking he's taken Shawshank Redemption, the short novella, and created a fucking classic film that exceeds Stephen King's story, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Green Mile, another great one that he took and expanded upon and did some major great things with that one. The thing is, as much as I hate the ideology of H.P. Lovecraft and the fact I've never read a fucking novel he's ever written, I've seen a lot of films either based on his work or inspired by his work. I've also read a lot of graphic novels that are based on his work. I just haven't bothered to actually read his actual work.
Yeah.
So I don't have that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm still on the fence whether or not to say that you ever need to really do that or not, because his influence is so large.
It is.
You know, his shadow does loom so large in culture. It's almost hard to really say whether or not you actually really need to read it at all. I guess if that's the case, I mean, although to be fair, he did write a lot of stuff.
He did.
So it's not like find one Lovecraft thing that he wrote that might actually appeal to you. Reanimator might do it for you. But the thing about Reanimator as a short story, most people don't know this, is that he wrote it as a serial. He didn't actually like writing it. He wrote it as a serial for a magazine to make money. So when you read the story, Herbert West Reanimator, it's very episodic. It just goes from one thing to the other. And Stuart Gordon just kind of like took the first path of Reanimator and just did it. So, and Reanimator 2 is literally the middle section of the story. So really, you could do a TV series of that short story. There's so much stuff that happens.
I'm fine with the 3 Reanimator films that Stuart Gordon did. I know someone one day will remake it because Stuart Gordon has passed. But until then, I'll just stick with those movies.
Yeah. I mean, I've been getting really into Louise. Is it Louise? No. It's Borges. I forget his first name, but his last name is Borges. Borges. Yeah. He's an Argentinian writer who lived, I think, in the 30s, 40s, and he died in the 50s. And his main this is like a cosmic horror science fiction kind of thing, where his short stories, I don't think he ever wrote a novel, but his short stories are all just brilliant examinations of reality and the universe and how it works, and he does it all in the context of a Lovecraftian type story where it's one narrator who goes somewhere and gets lost, or like in, say, The Circling Stones. It's a story where a guy goes in this circle of stones and the world kind of gets warped around him, and that totally destroys his perception of reality. But his most famous short story is The Library of Babel, where it's an allegorical story, but it's such world building. It's only 3 pages long, and there's so much world building in this place that's a library that contains not just every book ever written, but every book that ever will be written. All possible books in one place, but it's an allegory for the universe. And there's all kinds of little societies of librarians who live in the library. And there's also the question of infinity. What does it mean for something to be infinite? Is the library truly infinite? Does that mean our universe is infinite? Is it past eternal? Or was it one interesting line in it? It says that the library, with all its splendor and unity, must be the work of a god, but man, of course, can be the work of a malevolent god or pure chance. That was kind of funny. The library surely must be created by a god, but man, chance probably made him. But anyway, The Library of Babel, I highly recommend reading that. It's one of those, I read it once years ago and didn't really get it. But then I started, for random reasons, thinking about it last night and thought, huh, I thought of like a cool take for a feature film version of it. And that made me reread it and then like study it. Like I study scripture and like thinking about, okay, what's the elements of this part that would work? And then it really started clicking to me what the whole thing was, this whole cosmic reality that he was laying out. Anyway, so yeah, I think it was Borges is his last name, but I can't remember his first name. But like, yeah, I think William Gibson did an introduction to his stories in the version I have. But yeah, if you're interested in stuff like that, yeah, highly recommend Borges's short stories. But yeah, I would like to close this out, if we will, with something Fabio Fabrizi said about Fulci.
Okay.
He said that, well, by close us out, I mean, put us into our landing pad where we talk about our reviews for our ratings for this movie and such. But so Fabio Fabrizi, somebody asked him, I guess, what Fulci's most endearing quality was, like as a person and an artist. And Fabio Fabrizi, the composer of this movie, which, by the way, we don't have time, but we could talk just at length about the brilliance of the music. And like, I don't know if you noticed this, but like the language in the chorus is not Italian. It's a made up language. It's just gibberish.
I'm not surprised.
But apparently that's also a Lovecraftian thing, because Lovecraft often deals with made up languages in his stories. But anyway, Fabio Fabrizi said that Fulci's most endearing quality, his endearing characteristic, was his blasphemies, his destroying of anything sacred. And maybe that comes with in terms of like how he deals with icons, the human body, and cinema itself. You know, he's like Picasso in the sense that Picasso believed that you destroy something, you create art. So I guess that's what Fulci does, is like he blasphemes and creates something something transcendent in a weird way. Sadly, Fulci died of complications through diabetes shortly after working on Wax Mask, as we mentioned. And boy, oh boy, do I wish that there was a Library of Babel where I could go and rent the not just the a movie from a world he lived. He lived more, where we could see his version of Wax Mask, but also his version of Zombie 3, because yeah, he tried to do Zombie 3, but the movie was taken from him, and like the only thing he contributed was there was like the scene where a floating zombie head comes out and attacks somebody in a fridge. That was it. So
I don't even remember that movie, but yes, I don't remember it at all. I've seen it. I have it. I own it. I have it somewhere. I don't remember shit about that movie. I thought it was really horrible when I first saw it and never saw it since.
Well, yeah. So I would rate this movie, but what do I pick to rate it? What object or thing do I feel defines this movie more than anything? You know what? What is it for you? Do you already know?
No, I don't. I was like, how many blasphemies do you want to rate it? Or
well, that can be your thing, a Fulci blasphemy. Maybe that is your object. Go ahead, go with that.
I will rate it 4. Fulci blasphemies. Yes.
5. Okay. So I'm gonna go with. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I know what I'll do.
Okay.
I'm gonna rate it. I'm gonna also go 4 blind eyes out of 5. 4 blind, freaking white, like specifically Emily's blind eyes out of 5.
I actually thought about that too, but I go like, should I say 4 blind eyes or 4 pairs of blind eyes?
Well, if you say 4, that's 2. That's 2 pairs. So boom, it works.
All right. All right. Thank you all for joining us for Conversations in Horror. Thank you, Thomas, for indulging me and everyone else with our great conversation on Lucio Fulci and beyond.
On this supersized edition, I'm sure.
I'm sure that we've talked about Zombie and now we talked about The Beyond. I'm sure we'll get to some of his other movies that you have never seen before. But
we should definitely do a City of the Living Dead at one point.
Okay, well, we'll definitely put that on our list. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Conversation in Horror. I hope that you check us out, some of our previous episodes, and check us out for future episodes. Don't forget to check us out on social media and other pages to see whatever else we are coming up with next. And everyone, have a good evening. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.